Barack Obama. Thank you.
Largely, I'd like to address a lot of what's been come up so far and address some other concerns that I think people might have with Obama and sort of talk about why he's not just the best choice there is, but the best choice that is really possible under the circumstances. So I think we should go back to Spencer. And I love hearing Spencer talk to Democrats about economics, and they don't understand economics. And Spencer, why do you take history exactly? Because I don't know how your second year went, but mine's pretty tricky right now, and that can be a hard class sometimes. So I think it's interesting that people say Romney he understands jobs, he understands business, and I just don't think that's really in touch with the reality. I don't think Republicans are in touch with reality. I don't think anyone outside of the Democratic Party is in touch with reality. The deficit, it's not going to be fixed by anyone outside of the Democrats. If we could look to my left at Bernie Sanders, a lovely gentleman from Vermont. He would tax the hell out of everyone. That's really not something that we're looking at enjoying during a deficit. But at the same time, we do need to have some sort of taxes. And the right has not admitted that that's acceptable. In fact, most Republicans, perhaps even all Republicans in the legislature, in Congress, have signed a pledge not to raise taxes. And that's not a fact-based way of dealing with the problems that we have. If you look at Romney's plan to deal with the deficit, it doesn't have numbers. There's gaps in it because he doesn't have a way to address the deficit. If you take the deficit seriously, if you think the deficit is a serious problem, then you should vote for Barack Obama because he's the one who's going to reduce it. If you think that the financial crisis was a problem, you should thank Barack Obama for instituting the legislation, the Dodd-Frank bill, which helped regulate the situation, helped regulate. Spencer mentioned the bad housing policy of the government of the past 30 years. And of course, that was mostly Republican presidents, so that's worth noting. But also worth noting that that bad policy was just as equally related to the banks. And the banks are the people who are out of control. The banks are the people who have been causing problems. And through Dodd-Frank and through the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we were able to address those problems. We were able to address the risk that was created by the banks and clamp down on it. And again, this is just a situation of the people here have tried not to associate themselves too much with Romney, so I won't go say that so far. But the general...
Does the two-party system of the United States constrain the voter?
No, because we have open primaries. So we talked about the deficit. We talked about the fact, the Democrats just want to cut the defense spending. Oh no, we can't be in two places at once. Which is actually, it's an important note that Mike didn't quite mention that, but it is current U.S. doctrine that the U.S. military should be able to fight two wars at once, and that's not a reality. This is just one more thing of not dealing with the reality that it's not that we think defense spending is the biggest portion of the deficit. It's that we think it's the biggest portion of the deficit that's stupid. You mentioned the great care we take care of our soldiers, and you know what? That's actually, I completely agree with you. That's something where our defense spending is great. It's a shame that Republicans keep voting to cut the health benefits of soldiers in Congress. It's really unfortunate that instead they try to keep around programs like the F-35, which was a colossal fuck up that we, again, don't need. The F-35 is generations ahead of other fighter planes, and it's not something that's needed. It's come in over budget. It needed to be canceled. And Democrats are the people who are actually recognizing that. if you look, Romney the other day, because you know everyone's shocked when the military supports Republicans, introduced his military advisory board, and in addition to being generally panned, it was noted that many of the people on that advisory board were actually defense contractors who would benefit from Romney policy to buy more stupid planes and ships. It's just not realistic. So when we go back to, it's not if we're trying to address the deficit, which does not need to be nearly as low as Spencer thinks it does, but needs to be lower than it is, the defense spending is the way to do it. Now, when you ask Republicans how they're going to do it, it's cut NPR. NPR accounts for about 0.01% of the US federal budget. That's not some, like Republicans aren't dealing, likewise Planned Parenthood. These are minuscule things that Republicans want to cut to say that, one, that they're cutting things, and two, appease crazy people who don't like Sesame Street and
cut Big Bird.
Exactly. I was trying not to say it, but it's not, the priorities in spending are not realistic.
Do you acknowledge that even if we cut the entire defense budget, we would still have a sizable deficit?
Yes, and I don't have a problem with a sizable deficit. We're in a recession. I'm taking normal economics, actually, which is the other interesting thing about like economics classes is that like if you look at like what's considered to be like standard economics, they like spending.
Are you doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. So Social Security is going to run out in 2035, Medicare 2024. How do you pay for those?
You raise the cap so that people making more than $102,000 per year are actually paying fully into Social Security, so it's no longer a regressive tax. So that's sort of our general deficit area. I'm going to go back over to more specific on foreign policy. If we leave Afghanistan, it will become a haven for terrorists. I'm sorry, you want to look at a haven for terrorists, it's right next door to Afghanistan. Pakistan is where the Taliban hang out right nowadays. This is what we need to be looking at. If we look at drones, I think it was mentioned that one, we're not at war with them, and two, that it was an invasion of sovereignty. That's false. Pakistan lets us put the drones there, therefore not an invasion of sovereignty. Quickly, Gitmo, everybody knows this. Come on, it wasn't closed because of Republicans. He issued the executive order to close it, and they wouldn't fund it. Syria, there isn't a realistic proposition for actual intervention in Syria. Intervening would be a waste of money, a waste of lives, and would make the situation worse. No. I think you're actually, and the people less happy with the US is just because of the fact that Obama was very popular when elected, so a slight decline isn't really noteworthy. The fact that China's an issue, it's not really a concern. The fact that they own our debt, one, no longer the biggest owner of our debt. Two, I think it's been said that if China owns, $1 billion, $1 trillion of our debt, we have a problem. If China owns $14 trillion of our debt, China has a problem. Because if we don't want to pay it back, how are they going to stop us? And then, so just wrapping up, I think people are concerned about Obama because they're concerned that he didn't live up to the ideals of hope and change that were expected, and that he wasn't what they thought he would be. And I think, honestly, he was bipartisan. He offered a healthcare reform which was proposed by Republicans in the 90s. He worked with Republicans as much as he could, which was not at all because they wouldn't work with him. He went to them. As a liberal, if anything, he was a little bit too weak, and that's because he was realistic. The hope and change didn't mean I'm going to walk in there and change everything suddenly. It meant I'm going to work in this system the way it should work rather than the way it's been working, and it would have worked if not for Republicans. Yeah, it's really, they haven't told you to vote for anyone because there's nothing else better to vote for. It's not there's no realistic candidate. This is just the reality of governance. Barack Obama has done the best job that he could have given the circumstances, and that is why I would urge you to vote for the proposition.
Is the camera ready? Cool. Hi, Mom. She says she's going to watch it later. Later. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm here to tell you why you should not support the proposition that this House would re-elect Barack Hussein Obama, who still hasn't shown us his college records, and by God, still hasn't shown us his birth certificate. No, I'm just joking. But seriously, I want to start out by going through a little bit of summation of what we've heard in the debate, show you why it's still not okay for the proposition, and then I want to go in a little bit about like what y'all have been laughing about this whole time. Like every time we say you don't have to vote for Mitt Romney, everyone's like, oh, chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. If we don't vote for Obama, we have to vote for Mitt Romney. That's a false dichotomy that I think is ruining the United States. And ladies and gentlemen, by God, if I can like convince you of that by the end of the night, it'll be amazing. So let's start it out. So first of all, let's like, obviously, you know, we all got together today at the Union and we're like, look, everybody in this room is going to vote for the proposition. Like it's a liberal house in St. Andrews, like in, you know, Scotland, in Europe. Come on, the Republicans stand no chance. So what we were hoping to do is like, guys, let's just give them the best arguments we can to show them that not every Republican or not every right-wing person from the United States is a crazy, irrational hick. Hopefully we can do that by the end of the night. However, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to go down is, like, since you all already hate Mitt Romney, I just want to talk a little bit about Obama, as I feel it's kind of my job in today's debate. So first of all, let's talk about the stimulus package. Well, last time I checked, we're still not stimulated. And last time I checked, and rather than, like, so he gets the stimulus package together, and rather than work with both parties to fashion a growth agenda, he went for an all-out Keynesian nightmare, which is spending blowout, where he subcontracted out contracts to people who were already employed by the government who weren't firing their employees. So we're giving money to people who aren't losing jobs anyways because they were already employed by the government, ladies and gentlemen. Then he turns around and instead of being like, okay, so we passed the stimulus package, let's like to see if it works, and then we'll like pass some more stuff like a jobs bill or anything else. If that doesn't work, he's like, no, let's take care of 50 years of bent-up like social policy that the Democrats need to like shove down the throats of Republicans. A lot of sexual innuendos in my speech tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about health care, right? Like, I'm a fairly liberal guy. I was asked to speak on this side of the House, and I don't necessarily have a problem with health care. I'd like to see it done on a state-based level, but that's besides the point. It doesn't really come into the thing. However, I think when you become a president of the United States, in the second, like, or in the worst recession that we've seen since the Great Depression, your #1 political capital, like, expansion should not be on something about, like, 50 years of social policy pent up. I think you should focus all 4 years on the economy. And I think the fact that he spent most of his terms as presidency helping 30 million people, 10% of the US population, get health care by charging the other 90% of people more money and by making, in some cases, their health care worse. We haven't really found out yet. We'll see if it gets worse in the next few years. But not to mention the fact that like 90%, like 100% of Americans are suffering from the recession. But he spends most of his time as president helping out 10% of people get a really crappy health care policy from the government that doesn't even cover most of the things. Like, come on, ladies and gentlemen. The Democrats are supposed to be like the party of the people, where Republicans are supposed to be like the party of the rich. Help out the 90% of people who are suffering from a recession instead of spending most of your political capital on a healthcare debate.